So I thought I'd just come on here and give a little bit of a story time to my experience that I had in the summer of 2022. I spent that summer basically canvassing around the city of Fort Collins and into Loveland and even Longmont, gathering signatures to get Prop 122 onto the midterm election ballot. And basically, Prop 122 was the bill, the direct democracy ballot initiative that decriminalized psilocybin, mescaline, ibogaine, and DMT here in Colorado. And basically, how it started was like I was broke. I was looking for work, meaningful work, and I had just gotten done working. I had been working at FedEx as a package handler. So I was working these overnight shifts that were terrible, and I was working in this warehouse, just like packing packages onto trucks and stuff like that. Really not great work, not good. Paid decently, $15, $15.50 or something like this, but definitely not worth it for the insomnia that I was experiencing, the lack of sleep, the fucked up sleep schedule. But I've always been an advocate for decriminalization of drugs, and I've been known to use psychedelics before. And I'd only taken mushrooms like once or twice before I got involved in this project. But basically, I was out in downtown Fort Collins, and I saw somebody gathering signatures. And basically, she gave her pitch to me, and she's like, "Oh, we're trying to legalize these natural medicines." And I was like, "Oh, which medicines are you talking about?" And she's like, "Magic mushrooms, And I was like, "Of course, I'm gonna sign that." And then I asked, "Hey, how do I get involved in this?" And so she gave me some information. And I ended up with the person that I texted, like the person whose number I got from the canvasser. They didn't actually respond to me, and they ended up like reaching out to me like through Indeed, and I didn't even like, and I had applied through the website, through like their actual official website, but they like reached out to me and they're like, "We saw your application on Indeed." So I'm like, "Did you see my application?" But well, no, they said, did I say your application? They saw my resume on Indeed, apparently. But either way, I started working for this company called Landslide Political. And maybe they don't want me naming names and all that, but I'm an open book. So Landslide Political, basically that's what they do. They pay people to gather signatures and whatnot for ballot initiatives and things of the like. And we also did door knocking later in the year. So for the midterm elections, we helped Yadria Caraveo win her district. Basically, we were out in her district knocking doors ahead of the election. So they do all sorts of kinds of different things. But what was interesting about Landslide Political was their, in my view, bad approach. They're a very bad approach to the topic. And so in my experience, when I was out there on the streets and I was telling people about this policy, hey, like we're trying to get this on the ballot and then some get voted up or down to decriminalize psilocybin and along with these other things. We were mainly focusing on psilocybin, basically. That's the main focus of the bill. But they did not want us telling people about psilocybin specifically. So I think their political instincts were completely wrong. I think it speaks to the stigma, the continued stigma that exists around these substances, that even the canvassers out here that are supposed to be advocating for their use, or at least for their decriminalization, are not allowed to talk about the actual truth of what these substances are. So we were told to frame it in terms of, oh, we're trying to legalize medicines for veterans. We're trying to help veterans with PTSD, which is true. I mean, it does help with PTSD. It does help with treatment-resistant depression, and even OCD and fear of death, things like this. There's lots of studies that are coming out. And so that's technically true, but basically they wanted us to frame it in a way that wasn't going to be scary to voters. You know, they didn't want us to scare off people. They just wanted us to get the signatures, like no matter what. But in my experience, if you just tell people straight up exactly what you're doing, they support the bill, because people know that psilocybin isn't dangerous. People know that Colorado was the first state to legalize marijuana. They're familiar with with the war on drugs and the benefits of moving away from it. Some people I talked to were very against the weed legalization, and they were against the legalization and decriminalization of other natural plants and fungi as well. You know, at least they were consistent. But the public isn't stupid. Coloradans aren't stupid. They understand that psilocybin should not be criminalized. It's a mushroom. It comes from a mushroom. Many different mushrooms, actually. So that was one frustrating thing about the company. And I told this outright to the organizers, and they were like, sorry, you know, our hands are tied. This is just like how we're getting directed from the higher ups. And so Landslide Political, looking into it, they're based out of Utah, so it makes sense that they have these kind of conservative leaning strategies in mind. That, like, I can see why they were afraid that they weren't going to get the signatures if they just if they told everybody that we were trying to legalize psilocybin. But I think they were totally short-sighted, because I think if you go into it and trying to pull the wool over people's eyes, they're not going to respond well to that. And we should just be truthful and freaking blatant about what our advocacy is. That these drugs are natural, they're not dangerous. You can't die from taking too much psilocybin. They're dangerous in the mental space, but they're not physically harmful. They're not addictive, and they have a lot of potential. And so that's what I did. I did exactly that, and I was pretty good at my job, I'd say. I really loved it. Like, I really loved going out there on the streets and talking to people about policy and politics, and people from all different types of backgrounds that have used psilocybin, like on the right and the left. And that was also not the other beautiful thing about it. Was it was a direct democracy ballot initiative that it wasn't one-sided. It wasn't just for the Democrats. It wasn't just for the Republicans. It was just for all Coloradans to vote on. And I met so many incredible people. I met one man who had helped start the legalization movement in several different states for marijuana and for the legalization medically and recreationally. And he told me his stories. And I talked to so many people who had been involved in the Bernie Sanders effort, like myself, who I volunteered to knock on doors for Bernie Sanders. I told everybody I fucking knew about the Bernie Sanders campaign. I volunteered at my university trying to convince people and talk to people about the policies. And so I met so many cool people out there on the streets that were just like so open-minded and just people that were telling me their stories about going out into the pastures, looking for cow patties back in the 70s, picking out cubensis mushrooms to eat with their friends and things like this. So it was really an incredible experience. And when the midterms finally did come around in 2022, we passed the measure. We passed the measure because people knew what it was. It was funny because, like, we were trying to pull the wool over people's eyes, as if, like, you know, sometimes I would change the framing up. I would do that sometimes, like, if I was unsure of the person. But most of the time, people could see right through that bullshit. And I think the voters, most of the time, when you put it to the ballot initiative, they get it right 9 out of 10 times. And interestingly, on the same election cycle, we had 3 bills, or 3 ballot initiatives that were aimed at, in my view, opening up the market to sell alcohol more easily. So there was one that lifted the cap on the number of liquor licenses a business can own. So you need a liquor license to own, like, a liquor store. And basically, grocery stores don't only need like one liquor license, but they sell beer and stuff in Colorado. And so there was one bill that would have allowed other businesses to have more, like any business to have more than one liquor license, so that they could sell hard liquor um, in like grocery stores or just have multiple chains of bars and things and liquor stores basically. And that particular one, the one that lifted the cap, would have lifted the cap on liquor licenses, was sent to Landslide Political to like have the canvassers work on. So like we worked for months on decriminalizing psilocybin specifically, and then once we finished that, because we did that like vigorously, and there was a great response to the public, then we had this other bill dropped in our hands. They said, go and get signatures for this. Even as we were finishing up the signatures that we needed for the psilocybin bill, we were handed the second bill to also get signatures on. And part of the reason why that bill got onto the ballot in the first place was because of the psilocybin bill, because of the momentum that we had built with people, that we got them to sign the psilocybin bill first, and then while I'm at it, I guess I'll sign this other one that you're pestering me about. And I did not want to do this. First of all, I didn't want to do this bill, the second bill, about lifting liquor licenses and things like this. Because I just personally disagreed with it. I was like, well, this doesn't really seem like it's helping small business. That's the way that we're supposed to frame it, is that we're helping small business by allowing more chains of liquor stores to have multiple stores. No, that doesn't really seem right to me. Plus, alcohol is a dangerous drug, and I've struggled with alcohol in my life, and I'm sober from alcohol now, but I've struggled with it, and so many people have. It destroys lives. It's dangerous, and and the reason that it was given to Landslide Political was because it had failed from a different company, canvassing company, which I don't know the name of, but that company had failed to get the number of signatures required to get it onto the ballot, and the people who wanted the bill passed, or presumably wanted it passed, or wanted it on the ballot, looked at Landslide Political's organization and said, wow, you guys are doing really well. Here, take this as well. Maybe see if you can figure it out. So we ended up getting that one on the ballot. And then there were two other ones. There was one that legalized wine sales in grocery stores. And then there was another one that was like about hard liquor, again, in like grocery stores, something like this. And so in my mind, those three bills combined was like the liquor lobby's effort to just like sell as much like hard liquor and wine in grocery stores, which already have these huge chains all across Colorado. And then that would have and then you don't have to go to your local liquor store that's like right next to the place or whatever, because you could just buy your fucking whiskey or whatever right in Walmart or right in King Soopers. That's what it seemed like the goal was. And when it came down to the election, two of those measures failed. The voters passed psilocybin decriminalization that also decriminalized mescaline, DMT, and a compound called ibogaine, and also set up some infrastructure to allow for more legalization of more natural products, more natural medicines. They passed that measure, and they voted down two of the three. And the third one, the one that actually passed, was the wine. Basically legalized wine sales in grocery stores, and now there's fucking wine everywhere. Every time you go to a fucking 7-Eleven, there's alcohol in there now. More alcohol than there was. Because you could sell beer initially, but that one passed by a very slim margin. And to be fair, the Prop 122, the psilocybin bill, also passed by a fairly slim margin, but it was a few points. It was like, I think it was like 53% or something like this. I might be wrong on that, but it, but the other one, but the wine bill barely passed, and it took a while for them to like actually determine that it had passed or lost. Because in the days, the first few days preceding the election, I was watching the numbers, and it seemed to me that all three of them had passed or had failed. All of the alcohol bills had failed. I'm sorry, all the alcohol bills had failed, and the psilocybin bill had passed, but not all of the votes were in yet, and so one of them just kind of made it through. So the public knows that alcohol is bad. Psilocybin is amazing. And that's essentially my story of how I helped legalize mushrooms in Colorado. And if you found that interesting, I think that's great. I appreciate you watching. My name is Solomon. This is the Progressive West, signing off.